Welcome to Cash in the Cyber Sheets. I'm your host, James Bowers, and together we'll work with business leaders and industry experts to dive into the misunderstood business of cybersecurity and compliance to learn how to start making money from being secure and compliant. Welcome to Cash in the Cyber Sheets. Hey everybody, welcome back to Cash in the Cyber Sheets. I'm your host, James Bowers, Chief Security and Compliance Architect here at Input Output. Very happy to have you back here with us today. And today I want to go into talking about insurance coverage, specifically cybersecurity insurance. We've been reviewing some of the policies for our clients, and I want to talk about some things that as you look at your policies, either setting up a new policy or reviewing the policies that you have, that you look for these things. Now, today's episode will not be an exhaustive list of everything insurance, so I do want to put the disclaimer out there that these are things to look for, some good ahas, some very good pointers, but it's not an end-all, be-all. So, as always, we don't provide legal advice. Please consult with appropriate attorneys, yada, yada, yada. Do your due diligence, but these are definitely things you want to look out for and make sure that you're addressing in your policies. As I get everything pulled up here, I will say that I say every week, please go ahead and show us some love. Click that like, click that subscribe, and go ahead and send us some comments. Let us know some things that you would like to talk about and things that are working well for you and your organization. Always like to celebrate wins. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in here. Now, with cybersecurity insurance, it is definitely, if you have looked at gaining new insurance, that came out really weird, or if you are renewing or have been renewing for a few years, you've probably noticed some changes. One of the biggest things is that insurance companies are now asking a lot more questions. They have much more extensive cybersecurity questionnaires. Some are going in incredible depth as far as what type of policies and procedures do you have? What type of security controls? Is it set up on all of your systems? And what's very important about this is you don't want to flub on any of this. You want to make sure that you're answering honestly, and you also want to make sure that a lot of these things you have in place. Some things that they ask may, if you don't have it, actually prevent you from getting covered at all. Other things are definitely going to increase your premium. But what's very, very important is to not say that you have something in place that you don't. And where you want to be very careful is things like MFA. With the multi-factor authentication, it's typically, in a lot of organizations, set up on primary systems, but it may not be set up on every system or for every account. And where this can really create problems is if you have a data breach and you don't have the MFA set up. As you're going through the forensics, as they're working with you, as they're finding everything out, if they find that you didn't have the controls that you said you had, which allowed you to get the coverage in the first place, they could very well deny your entire claim. Sometimes this is just an oversight. I will say, with respect to a lot of the insurance companies, a lot of the incidents that we've been involved in, even when there's been some sort of a lapse, they did look at it, at least the incidents we were involved in, holistically. So if there was a lapse, they seemed to look at it as everybody's human and gave a little bit of leeway there. However, as the claims mount, as the claim amount goes up, that could also be a completely different story, and you definitely don't want to risk your insurance coverage over a lapse in a control. So this is where it's really important. Make sure you're doing your audits. Make sure you're doing your full due diligence. Review all of those questions. Make sure you have everything in place. And I'm not going to keep beating that dead horse there, but I can't say enough about it. So very, very important. Make sure that you have the controls in place that you say you're going to have in place. Another one that comes up is this enough coverage? And that's a very hard question to ask, and very serious legal answer here. It depends. It really depends on your exposure. Now, according to IBM Verizon data breaches, each piece of PII, each record that you have is essentially worth anywhere between $165, $185. So that's a real quick way to look at potential exposure. If you have 10,000 client records, that's potentially just under $2 million of exposure, 1.85 million. So if you're looking at a policy that gives you a single coverage of $1 million and an aggregate of $2 million, that might not be enough coverage. You might want to look at something with a $2 million, like $3 million aggregate, or something with more. So that's definitely not the end-all be-all way to evaluate if it's enough, but it is a really good quick litmus test, especially when you have such limited time to really invest in each of these different areas, each of these different questions, because instead of going through a 75-page insurance document, you probably have a lot else on your plate as well. So make it easy where you can. I also tend to err on the side of more insurance is better. Definitely in personal life and in business life, I typically try to carry the maximum amounts just because the price difference isn't typically too much. And it goes, I guess, with the territory. Risk management, always looking at how things could go sideways. To each their own, everybody has their own risk appetite, but definitely that's a really good metric to use. 165 to 185 for every data record that you have is a real good way to see what's our potential exposure. And you might even find somewhere that you can get rid of a lot of records that you don't really need, that aren't creating any monetary value for you, any marketing value. So little good can come of this to actually find some areas you might be able to reduce your exposure. All right, moving on. So some other things to really look for is in the insurance policies, and this is going to vary wildly. It's also going to sometimes be difficult to track down because in most policies, you'll have your standard policy language, then you'll have addendums, and sometimes even in those addendums or other addendums, you'll have definition changes. And it creates this beautiful mind little spaghetti matrix of this is what it says here, but oh, this alters this page and this page alters this page, and you're bouncing back and forth. You want to be very careful with that. Reason why is changing the definition of certain things could change the actual coverage limits, what you're protected against entirely. Where you see this a lot is things around terrorism, things around war, things around where certain attacks originate from. And you want to be very careful with that. It is with practically all insurance policies, acts of war, a lot of times are not covered. Understandable, it can make it difficult for the insurance company to pay out. However, if you get a data breach and it originates from, say, Russia or from China or some other country that we are not on the friendliest terms with, that can, in some cases, be constituted as an act of war or an act of terrorism, which may not be covered under your policy. So you want to be very, very careful of that. In some policies as well, there's an actual terrorism exclusion, or in cases you have to pay extra additional premium to have the terrorism coverage. So make sure to check that out to make sure that you're actually covered and you don't find yourself having a data breach and then finding out that technically this isn't covered. Really bad situation to be in. Another one, and I've seen it in some policies. I haven't seen it in all policies, but maybe this will creep up more. Something to watch out for is OFAC considerations, and also sometimes AIG, Attorney Inspector General list, making sure that your organization is checking these lists, that you're not engaging with vendors or employees that are on this list that are basically sanctioned, because that can actually void your entire coverage. So it can also get you in hot water in a lot of other areas. It can typically void contracts that you have, can create a lot of problems just all the way through and through. Really good to check out. But one of the most recent policies that we looked at actually had that as a stated exclusion in there. So you want to watch out for that. Okay, a lot of terrorism stuff in here. We don't need to talk about that again. Okay, exclusions. You want to definitely go through all the specific exclusions. This is where it can get really tricky too with all those addendums that I talked about, the definition changes, but you want to make sure that you understand what you are covered for and what you are not covered for. Now, a lot of policies will exclude any type of regulatory fines. Some will only exclude that if you were found negligent. Others have different wording altogether. It's very important to understand where you do have the coverage and where you don't, especially with certain regulations where they can compound. That can quickly create an issue that it would be difficult for your organization to cover without having that insurance coverage. So read the fine print, really check out those exclusions. What you also want to check is any type of subrogation clause is. Now, what subrogation does is it basically allows, once the insurance company pays you, let me take a step back. I will go ahead and preface that we are not legal experts. We are not insurance agents. Excuse me, silly rabbit. So always consult legal, yada, yada. Take this with a grain of salt. Do your due diligence. Let's continue. Subrogation clauses. What that does is it allows the insurance company, after they pay you, to basically assume that loss and go after others to reclaim it. What that looks like and what we've seen is, let's say you have a third-party IT company and another third-party software company or third-party security vendor. The insurance company may go after them, actually sue them, go after their insurance to try and say that they were the ones that were negligent, that they were the ones that were at fault. Now, we've talked about this before from the perspective of an IT company, from the perspective of MSPs. This is very important to make sure that as an MSP, you have in your contract the waiver of subrogation to basically say that the company won't allow the insurance company to do that. And that's very important because even if you're not at fault, it can be quite a big insurance company coming after an IT company or your vendors. And there's typically deductibles, meaning that just to get the insurance coverage, the insurance protection, now they're having to put a lot of money out of pocket. And in a lot of cases, practically all of them that we have seen, is it's not an egregious error by any vendor or other third party. Even where there was maybe a questionable issue, it really more came down to the actual company itself, not the third party, the one that had the original loss. It typically came down to them not managing that relationship in the way that they should, and ultimately it was their fault. So I'm typically very against subrogation clauses unless there was something egregious. You typically can't, if you have a data breach, start suing all of your internal staff to try and reclaim all the loss and lean on their policy premiums, on their insurance, I don't typically think that you should be able to attempt to transfer your risk to every single provider and third party that you have. And if so, probably need to negotiate the contracts, or they need to negotiate them with you. In any case, with that said, some subrogation clauses in insurance contracts will actually invalidate your entire coverage if you have any subrogation waivers. Meaning, if any of your vendors has a waiver of subrogation clause in their policy and you signed that with them, you could invalidate all of your insurance. That is not the case with all insurance companies. Some insurance companies, like some that we've reviewed recently, while they discuss subrogation, also have a line that says if the client has waived it, it will not affect their insurance. That's something you want to make sure that you check, because more and more companies are wising up to this, that you cannot transfer risk to them. They're putting anti-subrogation clauses, subrogation waivers in their contracts, and you want to make sure that you don't inadvertently cancel all of your coverage or invalidate it. Another big exclusion is False Claims Act exclusions. Now, this typically goes with any organization that is taking any type of government funding, government payments. This can be serious. Now, we talked in previous podcasts about False Claims Act, how serious, how outrageous those can be. Even $1 million in payments from the government can turn into a $3 million False Claims Act, actually more, but a pretty substantial False Claims Act impact. And most insurance will not even, if they do cover it, be able to typically put a dent into the type of damage you're going to have. Still, it's important to watch out for that in your exclusions. Something else to watch out for is how your insurance may actually extend to your third parties, and a lot of times like business associates. So if you have a loss, you can make a claim, but with some language, if your business associate or a third party has a loss, in some cases, they can make a claim against your insurance. Silly rabbit. The tongue is just getting all tied today. In any case, this can create a serious situation where now your insurance coverage is potentially covering multiple companies. If you were unsure if your coverage was enough for just you, it's most likely definitely not enough for all of you and all of your vendors. So you want to really look in that language to see who can make a claim against our coverage, who can make a claim against this policy, and exactly where does that liability begin and end. Something else to watch out for with your insurance policies is what may limit your coverage, meaning if any of the other providers have insurance, you may actually be limited by their claim limits, as some insurance will say we will only use the highest limit of any insurance that you are subject to or that could apply. So that's very important to make sure that you're not removing all of your coverage or limiting the coverage. And it is definitely a situation where the devil is in the details with all of these different insurance contracts and structures. So please make sure, go through all of those policies, read it forwards, read it backwards, and definitely follow up with your legal, follow up with your insurance teams to make sure you have the best coverage, to make sure you're adequately protected. Thanks for listening, and until next time. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget, click that subscribe button, leave us a review, and share it with your network. Remember, security and compliance aren't just about avoiding risk. They're about unlocking your business's full potential. So stay secure, stay compliant, and we'll catch you next week on Cash in the Cybersheets. Goodbye for now.
Life goes up and